Hey guys, this is an excerpt from my fantasy novel, The Price of Renewal. I just released this new copy with a brand new cover. I did this over quite some time, drawing each of these characters and putting them together, and it's just a much sleeker looking, awesome new edition of the book. You can get this on Amazon in paperback, hardcover, and ebook. But if the price is too high for anyone and you'd still like to get your hands on the book, I also just released a brand new mass market paperback edition, which is about 4.5 by 7 inches, so quite a bit smaller than this one. And that one is going for only $10. So go ahead and pick up your copy today over on Amazon. I'll put the link in the description. And let's go ahead and get on with this excerpt. The Price of Renewal by Austin Buffington. Chapter 2. The great star abandons us yet again. Aldenor's thoughts captured his observation of the setting sun. As the vibrant sky painted itself in hues of pink and deepening purple, he began his daily tour of the rugged dirt paths that served as the streets of Oakenwood Village. The sun was departing earlier now, and the wind was growing brisk, signifying the onset of the autumn season. Aldenor's boots stamped prints into the soft, damp soil of the trail, squashing the occasional yellowing husk of a fallen leaf. Soon the dense thicket that veiled the village from the rest of the continent of Ardania would morph from green to a palette of amber and maroon. By this hour the village lay draped in silence, punctuated only by the hushed conversations wafting from open windows, the light breeze whispering through the streets, and the distant sighs and snorts of farm animals. Aldenor made a right where his path intersected another, illuminated by the glow of an oil lamp hung on a wooden post that was nearly as tall as him. As he continued his trek, the inviting glow of candle and hearth beckoned from cottage windows that lined both sides of the path. The luminescent warmth failed to combat the chilly breeze that reflected the day's events. The truth is, Aldenor was overcome with melancholy from what he'd observed in young Anna Windlith. He reminded himself that she was an adult now, no longer the curious child who once filled the chapel with her laughter and endless questions. She had every right to feel the way she did about the Covenant of Renewal, yet still it alarmed him. As a child, Anna was a joy to have around the chapel, always full of energy and an eagerness to learn. Now she was growing increasingly distrustful of her religious upbringing, and Aldenor feared for her salvation. If she refused to take part in the practices that Saranath called his followers to, the threat of her mortality would only hasten. Anna was far from the first to feel this way. For the last couple of decades, the Covenant had been in decline, with growing disbelief across Ardania, perhaps even all Ernthal. Oakenwood was isolated enough already due to its location, but with its residents being some of the few remaining followers of Saranath's divine way, it only alienated the town more. Aldenor could recall a time when the Covenant held a more positive reputation, during his childhood. Upon sight of his humble home, the Reverend's woeful thoughts were silenced. He picked up his pace to the cottage door and wrapped one hand around its icy brass handle. With a gentle push, he was embraced by the pleasant, familiar scent of his comforting residence, his personal sanctuary. The cozy interior of Aldenor's dwelling came to life in resplendent glow as he set the pile of firewood in its hearth alight. He was enveloped by a blanket of warmth that accompanied the sweet, smoky scent of burning wood. The cottage was adorned with shelves of texts and baubles, amateur paintings, and robust handcrafted furniture. Upon passing through his bedroom door, his eyes immediately gravitated to a small carving of a tree that sat on his nightstand. He picked it up, feeling the rough texture of the wood against his palm. The miniature symbol of his beloved religion flooded his mind with memories of days long past. When he was about 15 years of age, only a few years younger than Anna, Aldenor was apprenticed to the priesthood at the High Chapel of the Covenant of Renewal. Seated next to Reverend Eldrick, young Aldenor was reading from the Tome of Vitality. "Reverend," Aldenor began, "the scriptures speak of Lord Saranath being here on Ernthal, living among his followers in Erdania. Where is he now?" "The tome was written in the days when our Lord walked the land, but nobody has seen him since," Reverend Eldrick replied. "It is not known where Saranath resides now, for he transcends our understanding, but he often speaks through dreams and visions." "Why has he not spoken to me?" Aldenor inquired further. "Saranath speaks to those whom he calls to action." Unsatisfied, Aldenor rambled yet another question. "The prayers in Scripture are written in another language. Genus Renovanus, for example. If he speaks to me, how will I understand him?" "Xylira vicaither virthul vithalion," Eldrick said, finishing the prayer in its mysterious language. "Grant us vitality, strengthen our hearts," a prayer of request. We do not understand the language used in these prayers, nor are we aware of its origin. But the scriptures provide the translation for us. When Saranath speaks to his followers, however, he speaks in a language they can understand. Saranath must be truly omniscient if he is able to communicate with people in any language, Aldenor said, his eyes wide with wonder. "So say the scriptures," Eldrick confirmed as he reached into the pocket of his robes. "I have something for you, Aldenor. For all of us, there arises times of doubt. This will help to reel in your faith in such times." Reverend Eldrick withdrew his hand from the pocket, revealing a small totem, a carving of the symbol of the covenant, the great tree. He held out his hand to Aldenor, who responded by holding out his own, palm facing up. The totem dropped into Aldenor's hand as warmth spread throughout his chest and a smile stretched across his face, a physical manifestation of his feeling of belonging. Holding the totem once again in his quaint home dozens of leagues from the High Chapel, Aldenor was overcome with a renewed and deepened faith. The memories that came to him when he held the little sculpture always provided a warmth even greater than that of the fire that was crackling in the foyer. His heart softened when he remembered his time at the High Chapel, where he lived the majority of his life before he was sent on mission to be a priest in Oakenwood Village. Feeling rejuvenated, Aldenor laid down in bed and rested his head, free at last from the sorrowful, racing thoughts of the day. He closed his eyes and promptly drifted into a deep and restful slumber. Aldenor found himself engulfed in a thick, suffocating darkness, surrounded by the gnarled, decaying remains of a forest stripped of its foliage. Withered roots coiled like serpents beneath the Reverend's feet as he staggered his way through the alien environment. All around him, bare, twisted branches clawed at the sky in what seemed like a desperate plea for salvation. The only light available to guide his path was that of several isolated fires flickering throughout the labyrinth of desecrated arbor. Shivering against the bitter gale that howled throughout the void, Aldenor inched closer to one of the pulsing splotches of orange light. As he approached, a faint warmth emanated from the fire, offering a small measure of comfort in the inhospitable climate. Finally being granted a reprieve from the chattering of his teeth, Aldenor began to take in his surroundings. The tragic state of the decrepit forest, its remnants turning to ash as the fire slowly spread, painted an image of imminent doom. Aldenor couldn't help but think of the countless sacrifices that he had witnessed and taken part in. That poor animal, Aldenor recalled from his most recent chapel service. It was still alive, even after its body was punctured. It was stuck, wriggling, and screaming in agony. Just as had happened during the service, a tear streaked down Aldenor's cheek and dripped into the burning fire with a hiss. It's no wonder Anna was so bothered after witnessing such a tragic accident. As if summoned by the Reverend's dolor, the wind roared and snatched hundreds of dry, brittle leaves from the ground. They swirled around him, forming a spinning mass that sent Aldenor stumbling backward in fear. Embers rose from the fire, merging with the whirlwind, igniting the leaves and turning them into a blazing, circling inferno. Aldenor's nostrils filled with the searing, acrid-smelling smoke that wafted from the scorching vortex. He was no longer cold as the immediate area was overcome with immense heat. The wailing wind and the crackling fire merged into a haunting melody, creating what clearly sounded like a low but powerful voice. "Reverend Aldenor," boomed the voice of the gyrating blaze. "My following is diminishing with the passage of time." "Who calls to me?" Aldenor pleaded. "Do not be so insolent," the cyclone roared. "Do you not recognize when you are in the presence of divinity?" "Lord Saranath," Aldenor gasped, cowering to the ground in a bow of submission. "Please forgive my ignorance." Aldenor was stricken with fear. He knew it was common for one to be frightened in the awesome presence of the divine, but expected a meeting with the god of vitality to be of a more benevolent nature. "You are one of my most faithful disciples," continued the voice of Saranath. "As such, it is your duty to enact my will." "Yes, your majesty, whatever you require of me," replied Aldenor, his voice wavering, quiet against the roaring fire. "The young woman of your congregation, Anna Windlith, has grown distrustful. She has fled to the old wizard Galdor in an act of rebellion. This will not do. You must go after her and bring her back to your village, Oakenwood." "She is an adult, my lord. Surely she can make her own choices," the frightful reverend began, avoiding the awesome power of his god by fastening his gaze to the ground. "What harm is there in her being away from the village?" "The woman's growing revolt is a threat to my power. As my followers decrease, so too does my ability and vigor. The weaker I become, the less I am able to provide the vitality my followers seek." "Your Excellence, forgive me, but," Aldenor said as he began to rise slightly off the ground, "you are a god. How can Anna's actions affect such things?" "Silence, you fool!" Saranath's voice thundered, reverberating the ground beneath Aldenor. "I require sacrifice, as I have commanded in the scriptures. If the woman travels and speaks freely, she will influence the beliefs of others. They will cease to perform the rituals of my decree, as many already have." Aldenor was perplexed. He had never considered the possibility of his god weakening, but surely encountering Saranath here, in the form of a monstrous display of natural force, was proof of his immense power. "Retrieve the woman and bring her back to your village," the voice repeated as the vortex of leaves and fire began to recede. "Do as I command." The storm settled and the temperature slowly dropped back to its former state. Trembling, Aldenor got back to his feet, the echo of Saranath's voice still reverberating in his mind. His heart raced, each beat a reminder of the overwhelming power he had just experienced. He stumbled backward and leaned against a charred tree for support, the bark scraping against his skin as he tried to steady himself. Disheveled, the Reverend stood, shivering once again. Aldenor awoke as he stumbled off his bed and slammed against the floor. He was no longer cold, as he was in the dream, but his heart still pounded. Could it be true? Saranath, the god to whom he had devoted his life, losing his power? And now he was to track down Anna Windlith, fled to that old man Galdor. Galdor, who lived a great distance away, according to Anna's parents. Aldenor tried to recall the last time he had traveled past the general area of Oakenwood Village. It had been quite a while. And what if it was simply just a dream? Surely that could be the case, could it not? It is not known where Saranath resides now, for he transcends our understanding, but he often speaks to us through dreams and visions. Aldenor thought, recalling the voice of Reverend Eldrick from all those years ago. Aldenor placed the soles of his feet on the cool cottage floor. It had to be him, Aldenor contemplated. Surely my simple mind could not have generated such a vivid and terrifying display. He stood up and stretched his body, reaching towards the ceiling. Aldenor began to adorn his priestly garb when he was hit with a realization. How could he find Anna? He had not the slightest clue where this Galdor lived. He would have to speak with her parents. Perhaps they could provide directions. In a state of uncertainty, Aldenor finished getting dressed and stepped out into the foyer. He grabbed his leather knapsack and began to fill it with various items that he felt might be useful on his journey. A pouch of coins, a water skin, some parchment. Continuing his chore, he retrieved a few biscuits of hardtack and a sizable knife from the counter by the eastern window. Aldenor paused and considered his collection of supplies, then ran to the bedroom to grab his prized possession, the wooden totem of the great tree. Feeling satisfied, he returned to the foyer and placed the final item into the bag. Once his pack was full, Aldenor mounted his bedroll on top of it, cinching it down with 2 leather straps. This was the same bedroll that had been in his possession for years, which he had slept on during his time at the High Chapel. Aldenor felt more confident with the weight of his supplies resting on his back. He put out the fire in the hearth and started for the door. Just before opening it, he wheeled around and took one last affectionate look at his humble abode. Aldenor lived a completely different life in Oakenwood than he had in the High Chapel. He had his own cottage in a peaceful, quiet village. With the sour taste of woe, Aldenor turned back to the door, slowly opened it, and stepped out onto the dirt path, heading for the Windlith family home. A humble priest sent on a mission by his god. A lonely thief trying to find her way in the world. A wizard's apprentice on a quest for liberation. Follow Aldenor, Naya, and Anna as they venture through Erdania and uncover the hidden truth of the Covenant of Renewal, a dying religion with a gray morality. Read the hit book, The Price of Renewal, by Austin Buffington, available on Amazon.